What's up, everyone? Nick here, tech consultant based out of New York City, and it's been a little while since we spoke last. A lot has changed. I think when I last spoke was probably closer to the end of August, but as of today, on September 21st, I'm a married man, have this new background setup thing here, kind of relocated my desk to kind of accommodate me and my wife and where we're working, and just trying to keep work separate from each other. But yeah, a lot has changed. Really kind of excited for everything that's happened so far. And yeah, I mean, between getting married, going on, a short little honeymoon up to Maine where we weren't able to do the full honeymoon that we wanted out to Australia, but it was still a great time to connect and disconnect, or connect with my partner, disconnect with work, and just kind of reset myself kind of on this next stage of where I'm going in my life. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of a quick update on why I've been gone for the last couple of weeks, but really excited to get back into things. So today's video is going to be something that I've wanted to do for a while. I thought it would be really interesting because I get a lot of questions about kind of the non-linear path that I've taken to where I'm at today, and wanted to talk a bit about that. So with that, let's just jump into it. So I thought for today, what I wanted to do was just kind of run through, how the heck I ended up as currently as a, sales engineer. So essentially helping salespeople, sell our software, but I also kind of help support from the technical side and do a bunch of other kind of cool stuff. But when people look at my background and saying, "Hey, Nick, you studied biomedical engineering. Like, why are you selling marketing software right now?" And there's kind of this really nonlinear path for how I actually got there. And there was a lot of really interesting things that I did along that path to kind of make it into the tech world and really be pretty successful so far. So essentially, what I started off with was in college. I was a biomedical engineering student where I went to school. I picked up biomedical engineering my first year and kind of went through my 4 years and completed my degree in biomedical engineering. But what I decided and kind of thought as I was going through that, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there is a lot of incessant cheering outside. I don't know what's going on, but anyway, back to it. Essentially what I did was I studied biomedical engineering. For the longest time, I had thought I wanted to be a doctor. Kind of had this idea in my head of, maybe I do this biomedical engineering degree and maybe right after college, I'll end up working as a doctor. So going to medical school, doing the whole residency thing. And, at the time, kind of started to realize that that wasn't the path that I wanted to take at that point in my life. So, what I really started to find an interest in was tech and, all of the things associated to the technology field. So I don't really know what I wanted to do in the tech industry, but essentially what I ended up doing was I picked up a minor in information management. Essentially at my university, it was called an information management and technology minor. So what that essentially meant was I took like a Java coding class, I took a web development class, I took some database theory classes, as well as a SQL class. SQL, essentially just, interacting with databases and, pretty common language for being able to, interpret data and manipulate it. So I did that and, just really fell in love with it. So as I was going through this minor, I kind of, as rolling into my senior year, really decided that I wanted my first job out of college to be some sort of technical consulting role. What that meant to me was working for one of the bigger consulting companies and essentially just interviewing and working my best towards trying to get one of those roles. Ended up, doing a lot of studying, a lot of resume edits and writing of cover letters, which I'll go through in a future video, how I approach, the resume and cover letter process, because I get a lot of questions on that as well. But essentially, worked really hard. I was, very privileged to have the opportunity to be recruited for some of these companies right on campus, and was basically able to talk to a lot of different companies, had a lot of different interviews, and then ultimately ended up getting my first job in consulting basically within a couple of months of my senior year. So by December of my senior year, I had an offer in hand. It was awesome. The second semester of college was super stress free because I already had this job offer and was basically ready to go and move into New York City. So essentially, what happened after that was I moved to New York City, was super excited, jumped into this consulting role, and started doing some fairly interesting things within the firm that I ended up joining. But after several months, I realized that it just wasn't for me. I was working in an industry that just wasn't super interesting to me. Loved the people. I met some of my best friends while working at that firm, but just wasn't really what I wanted to do. So through a connection that I made at a career fair, probably a couple years prior when I was still in university, ended up reaching out to that person, and in a very fast process was able to, in the matter of a couple weeks, get a job at a medical device company doing field work for this medical device company. So it was really cool. I got to work with doctors and surgeons and got to work with biomedical engineering teams at different hospitals here in New York City, and really did some like really really interesting stuff and met some really smart people along the way, and actually got to witness neurosurgery and ENT surgery and talk with surgeons about everything that they needed to do in order to be successful with the medical device and the software that the company I was working for at the time essentially offered to that surgeon. So really interesting work. Wouldn't change that experience for the world, and I learned so much about project management and working with IT and doing a bunch of just like relationship building, a little bit of sales. There was a lot of really interesting work that I was doing, but towards the end of that ended up really trending more towards like me having to repair devices, and it just became a bit monotonous, and I wanted to move on to something new. At that point, I had done that for some time and kind of started to fall back into my roots of tech and my interest in software and software as a service and all of that. Really interesting stuff that was at the time, probably circa 2015 2016, when I started to like really develop this interest, and then kind of moving into 2018 or so when I actually ended up making the leap into my first software startup. Was there was just so much going on in the New York City tech scene. Ended up finding a course on Udemy on web development. I took a web development class in college, as I mentioned earlier, but this course really went through in much more detail how to build a full stack web application, and that was just so interesting. I worked with Colt Steele. Didn't work with him directly, but Colt Steele is amazing. He has like an amazing method of teaching. I'll link his course below, which really did a lot for me and helped me in my career down the line. But yeah, he was really great at just teaching you all the different concepts and kind of pulling it together in different projects. And a lot of those projects were able to fold into things that I were able to host, throw it onto my blog, nickoftime.co. Link that below as well. I'll talk about that blog at some point as well, but definitely go check it out. And really was starting to be able to showcase some of my skills as I was going through that interview process for different tech companies. I found that my method for writing resumes and cover letters was pretty beneficial and definitely kind of a differentiator for me as I was starting to kind of try to find my space in that tech field. And ended up having a lot of different interviews, and some were successful, some were not successful. I'd say more so unsuccessful than successful, but I learned a lot through the process, and ultimately ended up at a software company doing kind of a combination of implementation of the software platform that I worked with, consulting with clients, doing solutions design, whiteboarding stuff, putting together process flows, all this really interesting thing, so that I had never really done in a professional setting, but was kind of pulling on some of the stuff that I had done kind of on the side after I graduated, some of it kind of pulling on my, the knowledge that I was able to gain from that IT minor that I took and kind of spoke about earlier. But there was a lot of different things that I was doing throughout that entire process. Water break. Yeah, water's great. Anyway, so I was kind of going through that process and ended up, learning a ton. I got to work with product teams. I got to work with engineers. I got to work with customer success managers, as well as more senior level people in like the customer success side of things, and working with like directors and things like that. And we were a small company, but because we were such a small company, and got to have um, a pretty wide stream of influence and learned a lot. I was there for about a little over a year and a half, but as I was starting to learn more there, I kind of was looking for a change, and ultimately ended up kind of starting a new recruiting process where I was kind of maybe looking to be a product manager, maybe looking to be someone on the sales side. Didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but was just kind of casting a wide net and taking a lot of calls and interviews and kind of applying that same process for resume writing and cover letter writing that I will be creating a video on hopefully in the future. But it was a really long process, probably over the course of 6 months. I talked to so many different companies and had a lot of interviews. Again, a lot of interviews didn't go as well as others, but at the end of the day, ended up getting this role that I'm currently in as a sales engineer. And what a sales engineer is essentially a technical or more technically minded person who is essentially helping the sales team. So like an account executive or a salesperson, helping out those folks in putting together technical demos or talking with engineers about how to integrate the software to their existing environment. So I did a lot of conversations with them, like ended up loving the company and loving the culture and loving the people that were there, and that's kind of where I'm currently at. And through that process, I've learned so much about what it means to not only be a salesperson, but also how to present different solutions in different lights, depending on who you're talking to, as well as just showing the value of something that you have. And I think the sales skills that I've gained as a part of this role, I think will carry with me through the rest of my career, wherever I decide to take that. I think sales is incredibly useful and important for a lot of people to understand, because whether you're an engineer or you're a graphic designer or a freelancer or a surgeon, you essentially, with every interaction that you have, you're trying to sell yourself to the other person that you're delivering service for, whether that's internal stakeholders or clients that you're working with, or you're trying to bring on a new patient, or trying to sell your project to the executive team at the company that you're working for. You always need to be able to take ideas that you have and present them to others in a way that makes sense to them, and you can get buy-in from other people. It's just a really fast-paced and dynamic and sometimes stressful environment. But I think sales has really been incredibly beneficial to me, and I've learned just so much from all the people that I've worked with. Essentially, yeah, that's where I'm at today. I've kind of come a lot of different ways, starting out in biomedical engineering, thinking I was either going to be a biomedical engineer or making prosthetics or something, or being a doctor, and then kind of shifting more towards the technology side of things, working as a consultant for a short period of time, then jumping into medical devices, then coming into marketing software and on the post-sale side, and then now working on the sales side doing similar work, but still in a technical capacity. So yeah, that's kind of the TLDR of where I've come from and how I've actually gotten to the point where I am today. But I hope you all found this interesting, useful. Feel free to drop me any comments on anything I talked about today, or have any questions about things that you're hoping to do or hoping to break into in the future. Just keep on at it, keep trying hard, work your network, and really put your mind to anything. I think the big takeaway for me for this whole process of the 5 years or so since I graduated is that there was a lot of things that I just had to put my mind to a goal and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And then there's this process that you follow, right, to essentially get there, and just kind of staying at it, staying diligent, not getting discouraged when you get roadblocks thrown away, because believe me, there are a lot of roadblocks. But yeah, that's my story of where I'm at today in my career history. And in the future, again, we'll be talking a bit more about my approach to cover letter writing or resume writing. But again, yeah, really excited. Looking forward to sharing this with you all, and we'll talk soon.